Great. Hi, everyone. So glad you're here. Welcome back. So today we're going to continue our conversation of some of our ambitious science teaching practices. So we're going to warm up by talking about your week using the Talk Taxonomy, which Sigit and I are going to model for you here in a second. We're going to talk a little bit more about revising your phenomena, which you started working on last time. And we're also going to have a review of the Understanding Global Change framework, which is something that Sigit briefly introduced you to on the boat with Call of the Sea. And if you've worked with me before, you might be familiar with this tool. And then we're going to talk briefly about making connections to DCIs and also planning for our February 5th Saturday meeting, which we're really looking forward to. And just an update, our plan is to do that remotely. So you can be at home or at school or wherever you feel comfortable, and everyone will be Zooming in to that event. Okay. So to start us off with this warm up today, we're going to just briefly review the Talk Taxonomy. So again, this is on page 63 of your book, if you have it available to you. But the idea with the Talk Taxonomy is to sort of have these back pocket questions, right? Ways that you can really start to press student thinking and get students to start moving their thinking forward, both individually and also collectively as a group. So that can include things like probing, like asking students to share their ideas, make their ideas public for the whole group, pressing, asking for evidence or justification, or posing what if questions to the student in response to their the information that they're providing, making sure that there are follow-ups, things like say more, or can you explain more about that, or what makes your idea different from what this other student said a few minutes ago. And then always opening up crosstalk, prompting other students to participate, right? And making sure that everyone can be involved in the conversation. Wait time is also a really important part of this taxonomy. We often feel like 5 or 10 seconds is a really long time when we're in the classroom and it's silent, but really that's also processing time. So we want to give students the time that they need to prepare some kind of response that they're going to make public. So it's okay for there to be some silence when you're facilitating student discourse. You could revoice things, so rephrase how students expressed an idea, especially if you think it's something important or that you want other students to pay attention to. And you can also ask students to focus in on a particular part. Maybe they gave you a response or they started drawing a model or something, like, let's focus in on a particular part of this and dig in a little deeper and tell me more. So these are, again, these are your back pocket talk moves. These are the things you can come back to when you're trying to get students to express themselves and explain what they're thinking as they learn about the phenomena in your units. So to just demonstrate those talk moves, I'm going to work with Sigit a little bit. Sigit, do you actually want to say something about the information you added about the goals of the different talk moves?
Yes, what I also, if you can look at if you have the book at page 63, they also give an 3 different examples of sequence that you can use based on what your goal. So what they're talking always is about like choosing, like making a decision. What's your goal from this conversation before you enter them, of course. And then once you have a goal, then there are like different ways, that different questions for the same topic. So probing can look differently if your goal is different. So these are like examples there.
Awesome, thanks, Sigit. So what we want to do is sort of model this for you really briefly. And then we're actually going to send you out into little breakout rooms to work in pairs and try to be very mindful of using these talk moves when you just have a casual conversation about how your week's going. Okay, so ask each other questions, think about revoicing, think about focusing, using these talk moves as you just have a conversation. Because in reality, these are also just moves that you should be using if you're having a meaningful give and take discussion, right, with anyone about anything. But these are important moves to be mindful of when you're working with your students. So I'm going to start this off by asking Sigit about her week and something that she told me about, that she went out to go see the salmon recently. So Sigit, would you share just a little bit with the group about your experience?
Yeah, it's first time I went to Lagunitas Creek in Marin to see the salmon spawning area.
So it sounds like you knew where to go. How did you know about where to go? Lagunitas Creek is where you went, right? So how did you know to go there?
Yeah, and Megan told me about it.
Oh, interesting. Can you tell me more about the conversation you had with Megan? How did Megan know that they were going to be there?
She lives nearby, and also this is her specialty, her research. So she told me about going there and asked if I want to join.
Okay, interesting. So it was her research. Does anyone else know anything about Megan's research, about what she studies and how she would know about the salmon? Anyone else in the group?
I think she said it might have been last year that at first she began her work as an artist, and she specialized in salmon, like sketching, right, or painting salmon. So she must have, you know.
Oh, interesting. So she really started by studying and looking at the salmon. Does anyone else remember anything else about Megan's work, and anyone want to add to that, and what Megan studies now, or what the work she does now?
I'm very impressed that Hyun can remember something that she said a year ago, because I don't remember that. I was going to say, now she's a river otter researcher, and so, but obviously if you're looking in the water for river otters, I mean, you're at the water, right? So you're going to probably notice what else is there. So it makes sense that she would also notice the salmon.
Interesting. So maybe there was something about her being out there looking at the salmon, and then she also started studying the river otters, or maybe she was out there looking at the river otters and then she started studying the salmon. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Sandra?
one way or the other. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so just in that short amount of time, you can see that I prompted Sagit to share something, right, to make it public. I probed her, I pressed her a little bit more and asked her to explain more about, like, how did she end up at Lagunitas Creek? Like, what was that, how did that happen? And then I opened it up to crosstalk, right? And Hayun and Sandra chimed in, and then I revoiced something that Sandra had said, right? I focused in on something, an idea. So again, being mindful of how you're constructing and opening up talk and moving the talk forward, these talk moves can be really helpful. Okay, so we're just gonna send you into groups, and we want you to talk for about, 5 to 8 minutes with your partner, and you can just be thinking about these talk moves and trying to use them, and to have just a nice conversation about how your week is going. And I know it's been probably a really difficult week, but we're just so happy that you're here. So, and that you can have these conversations together. Okay, so I'm gonna make, okay, so let me, one second. Okay, great. I'm going to send you into your rooms. We'll see you in 5 to 7 minutes-ish. So around 3:52. See you soon.
Yeah.
This meeting is being recorded.
Right.
We can see you, Megan.
Oh, yay! Hi, Megan. All right, welcome back, everyone. So how'd that go? How do we feel about the talk moves, crosstalk, see some thumbs up? Okay, awesome. I asked Julie to share out something that she had observed or that she was feeling in thinking about the talk taxonomy. Julie, would you share that thought with us?
Sure. Just one of the things that I started talking about is just how ironic that it is that we're so uncomfortable with silence. Just, I think maybe as a society, I don't know, but And just that when that happens in the classroom, my first thought is like, not like, good job, Julie, you just asked a probing question or anything. But my first thought is like, what did I do wrong? Like, nobody's talking. And so did I ask it wrong? Did I say something wrong? So yeah, we were talking about that for a little bit.
Yeah, but that reality is that when you have that wait time, when you have that quiet pause, that silence, like that's processing time. Like that's when students might be really doing some good thinking and might be preparing themselves for sharing an idea or putting some ideas together. So it's okay. Like it's okay to give them that time, and not expect every second to be filled with talking or ideas. So any other observations or feelings or responses to thinking or practicing with the Talk Taxonomy? I heard some great conversations. It was nice to pop in and say hi to everyone. So, okay. All right, so let's get going today. So we're going to start off our main part of today by thinking about revising our phenomena that we started talking about last time. And I know that I think all of you have met with either myself or with Sigit to talk about your units and your phenomena, which is great. So last time, if you remember, we did some work on thinking more about like what makes a good phenomenon, right? And we did this phenomenon sort where we had different ideas for phenomena, and we thought about the different phenomena criteria about what makes a good phenomenon versus a bad one. And we also had you brainstorm, just like write down 5 ideas, right? And don't have to be good ideas, just write down some ideas. Let's start getting them out. And again, like we need this to be a puzzling event or a process, something that's big enough that really requires a wide range of science ideas, and that students are going to have to really look at like data and evidence in order to understand it, right? So this is our definition of a phenomenon that we're using from ambitious science teaching. And our role is really to create those opportunities for students to make sense of the phenomenon and synthesize their understanding and learning about these different topics to explain the phenomenon. And that there are 2 different types of phenomena. We've gone over this before, that there's sort of the over time, the change over time. With our otters, it's sort of the before and after, like the otters weren't here before and now they're here, so what's changed? Or you could think about a seed, growing into a tree, right? That being a process, or sort of a compare contrast situation, like comparing 2 different ecosystems or 2 different volcanoes. So these are our big types of phenomena. And of course, as I mentioned, we've been using our river otters as one of our prime examples. So last time we came up also with a list of what are the big ideas if we built out a river otter unit in the way that we have and we talked about in the past, like what are the big ideas? And remember that big ideas are the connections, the relationships that help us explain the phenomenon, right? So we came up with some really great ideas about how we'd want to talk about human impacts, right, in the environment and wildlife. We want to talk about food webs, and habitats and the physiology of the otters and probably their structure and function and evolution. These are all things that would be potentially included in a unit about our river otters and explaining their return to Marin County. And I just want to draw your attention back to this figure in chapter 2 that really shows you like this is an iterative process, right? This isn't just a like, oh, I figured out my phenomenon and I figured out some big ideas and now I have some standards and now I'm done. But really that like to match all these things up, like your phenomenon and your explanation of your phenomenon. Sorry, not sure why the slides are being weird. There we go. To match your phenomenon with your standards, right? And then also think about what are the activities, what are the data sets, how are students going to engage in this? Like that's really about going back and forth, right? And sometimes you have to revise. And that's a lot of the conversations that I know I've been having with some of you in the group is that like, let's start to figure this out. Let's start to outline this. And then we can sort of fill in the pieces of like, what are those data sets? What are those activities that they're going to do? And how might the phenomenon change slightly depending on the kinds of activities and data sets that we want students to learn to look at based on the standards that we want to hit. So again, we're totally open to adjusting and shifting, but we just still want to keep moving forward and getting some of those ideas out today. So, okay. So what I'd love for everyone to do is take their phenomenon. I know some of you, you're all in different places with your phenomena and how fleshed out or how detailed they are. But I want everyone to revise at least the one phenomenon they think they're probably going to move forward with. And draft some of those big ideas of what are those connections that you're going to make to the phenomenon, those big, big concepts. So again, big ideas should express relationships, not just facts, right? So interrelationships that help explain the phenomenon. So in the Jamboard, what I did was create this little table, and you're going to work in groups, and you can put your name and then a sticky that describes your phenomenon, and then some stickies with those big ideas. And in the Jamboard are already some frames that have some ideas from last time. Let me just show you that really quickly. So like this is group 2 from last time. So you can go and get your stickies from last time if you want to use those or revise them. And I'm sorry if I don't put you in quite the right group from last time, but feel free to just copy paste them. You should be able to move them over to whatever group you're in, whatever group you're working in. So we're just going to give you about 10 minutes to just start, keep sharing with your group, like what, and make sure you get to those big ideas, right? Like what are the big ideas? What are the big concepts that you want students to understand? And just start getting more of those ideas out and share them with your group members today. Any questions or comments? I'm going to put the link to the Jamboard in the chat first. Make sure that's working for everyone. If everyone could click on that and make sure they're getting there. Give me, I see a nod from Megan. Oh, yep, I see people coming in. Okay, great. Looks like it's working. All right, let me go back to the breakout rooms. Okay. All right, I'm going to send you out into your breakout room. So we'll see you at 4:13 back here.
Jessica, is Ryan the only person on room 3?
I moved him.
Oh,
He's
okay.
in room 2. Yep.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go there and see what's going on.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. All right, so how did that go? So I had great conversations with both groups. I overheard a lot of great ideas and people really moving their thinking forward about their units. Does anyone just want to start us off by sharing out what they're thinking about and their phenomena? Either group 1 or group 2?
I'll jump right in if that's all right, because
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, go ahead.
it was this that helped me kind of solidify exactly what my phenomena was. I recently got permission to raise trout in the classroom, and it's something I've done in the past. So it's fun for me. I've been at this school 5 years, haven't done it. And so now I'm back on the train. So using that, the idea that literally 50 eggs will be delivered to my classroom. We'll set up a tank, and for a month or so, we will raise trout and hopefully get on a field trip to release them. And there's so many components to get the students involved and to see the relationships and how humans have impacted this. And so I'm excited. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I know that Anna is also going to be working on looking at the salmon and seasonality of their, presence in the streams and creeks around Marin and Sonoma counties. So she's really excited to work on that. So I can see you two collaborating and brainstorming together, especially on February 5th when we all get together. I think that'll be great. So, and I'm already talking with Megan, again, because she has worked with both the otters and the salmon about getting data sets to really look at, these patterns in our local habitats, about when they show up and their life cycle and all of those things. So we'll be excited to share that with you then.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, Megan and Sandra, just want to give us a really quick overview of your work together, your project, what you're thinking.
We're both like, do you want to go? Do you want to go? So Megan and I are working together on a monarch butterfly unit. She has first graders and I have everybody because I'm the garden teacher. And so our initial driving question we were thinking about was investigating why has the population been declining over, I think it's at least 20 years, maybe longer. And as we were sort of gathering information and data sets for this, or, looking for data sets, we discovered that in 2021, actually, there was an increase. Not like, way back up to where, but definitely a very positive, like, hey, it actually didn't keep decreasing this year. It went back up a little. So yeah, we're talking about like how to incorporate that. We're going to look at, we're going to start kind of simple with like structure and function. Or actually, I think the first question we had on our list was, what does it need? What does a monarch butterfly need as far as food, habitat, temperatures, and then look at life cycle, look at structure and function of the butterfly, structure and function of the milkweed plant that supports its caterpillar, structure and function of the nectar plants that support the butterfly. Yeah, I think we have about 7 different like evolution progression questions to where, kind of clinch them, get the kids really excited about the butterfly, knowledgeable, and then have them start doing this investigation of like, well, why have the populations declined, and what are the causes behind that, and have them just sort of start doing some sense making from the data.
Awesome. Anything you want to add to that, Megan? It's a great summary.
I was saying, no, she got it. She like nailed everything. As we were thinking of ending with like a kind of, take action of just, potentially propagating and distributing milkweed that's native to our area to at least our school families, so we can help support the habitat, and then kind of then thinking about educating, either having some of the classes either make pamphlets or something about the types of milkweed or what they like plants to plant, so we can help support these populations.
Yeah, and I know you were looking at sort of the pesticides and the potential human impact even on your own campus, and having students investigate what that might look like. So that's great. Really thinking about those action items and how students are going to think about what they can do in their community. So wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing with the group. Okay, so then we have group 1. And I know that both Hayun and Julie are going to be investigating river otters. So Hayun and Julie, do you want to just chime in and tell us a little bit about the particular focus that you're thinking of having in your units?
Sure. I am trying to tie that into, so I kind of want to do that whole same thing like that they were just talking about with monarchs with otters, but also just tie in our local, own campus. And so we have had some sightings that are right out here in our bay and canal, which are right near us. And then we have this Glenwood Marsh, right, that's here. And there's been some rumors of that being developed very recently. And so we're going to be meeting with some people from the district and some people from Point Blue and some other places to talk about that and maybe hear more about that, but trying to kind of tie in our local watershed, and the health of it, and then using kind of the river otter as our sort of like, almost like a mentor species or whatever, but also as kind of then learning more about what are the other plants and animals in our marsh and all of that, and tying in just stories of restoration, and hopefully being able, we had some plans to do a little bit of restoration in the marsh, but now that we know some of it's going to be developed, I don't know how that's going to play out. But so we still have a lot of questions, but we're excited, and I'm excited to hear about the monarch thing too, because, and I want to share just a resource, Turtle Island Restoration. They have some excellent people who will they'll give you native milkweed. They'll, you know, they're very helpful. So I just want to share that resource. Audrey Fusco, she's amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. That's great. Yeah. And so again, you're really trying to emphasize that idea of habitat loss and restoration and how students can investigate that and its impact on otter populations. So wonderful. And Hayun, do you just want to say a little bit about your emphasis and sort of the big ideas you want to focus on?
Our big idea will be what the river otters need to be to increase in numbers in population, but what are also the human impacts on their environments? How are people's consumption or the ways in which they create waste pollute their environment. I am big on global warming, study of global warming, and so we will be touching upon plastic waste. We will be touching upon fast fashion that's being churned and just creating tons of waste per year, and how that will inevitably impact river otters and all species of life. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, lots of big connections and thinking about our water quality and our waste and consumption, and again, then connecting that back to climate change and how all of those things are truly interrelated. So thank you all for sharing all of your phenomena and your big ideas. And again, you can see like the real breadth and diversity of the group and like what we're thinking about and the kinds of projects that we're gonna engage our students in these different units. So moving forward, there's some additional tools that we can be using to really start like working together and coordinating and thinking about the content that we're teaching and the big ideas and how students are going to explain the phenomena that we are introducing to them. And so for the rest of the time that we have together today, I'm going to sort of give you a reintroduction to the Understanding Global Change framework. This might be a review for some of you, but some of you might not have really seen it in much detail before. And this is really a tool that can help us, again, continue to deepen our thinking in terms of our planning. I really am thinking of this as a teacher facing tool. This is something that we can use to further our thinking about how we teach. But I just want to let you know that in higher grade levels, middle school, high school, and beyond, even in undergraduate, and I've even used it with graduate students, that this is a tool that students can really be using to show their thinking and make models and make connections. And so I've used this tool in a lot of different ways with both students and teachers. But these are tools that come out of my project at Berkeley called Understanding Global Change. And really it's about how do we understand climate and environmental changes and thinking about our place, like all those connections in the Earth system that are interrelated. And how do we also find paths to a resilient future, right? How do we envision a world that it's more like what we want for our, for us and for our children and our children's children and for the ecosystems that we live in. So this is a whole website, which I'm not going to go into great detail about today, but there are a lot of resources. There's a lot of content about different global changes and the different causes of global change that you can find on this resource. So I'd be happy to share more of that with you, and we either meet individually or on February 5th if you have questions. But I'm going to point to just certain things about the website and certain tools that you can find there. So one is that we've created this Earth scene, which a lot of students and teachers have used as a way for you to make models. So if you were on the boat, on the Call of the Sea trip, we used a version of this Earth scene to make our models and take some notes. And this is something that we can come back to and also have our students, show their ideas on this Earth scene. And it creates a little bit, less work because, we already have a farm and a city and the ocean and the mountains represented. We can change this, we can simplify it or make it more complicated depending on what we want to give to our students. But this can be a place where students can make their thinking visible and share their own ideas and add to this. So this is one of the tools that's part of the Understanding Global Change collection of resources. And the other is this framework. So again, like all of you are talking about some really, like, again, a whole bunch of diverse ideas about like the world and making connections and the different ideas that are going to be in your units. And so one of the ways that we can start thinking about organizing the big ideas is using this framework where we've taken all those topics, all that content, and we've organized them into 3 big categories. The first is that there is the Earth system, and there are these big ways that the world works. So a lot of you are talking about water quality and so things like the water cycle, right? Or some of you are talking about global warming and climate change. So like the greenhouse effect, right? These are processes that are happening all the time that are really big and really important and have shaped the way our world looks for, billions of years in reality. But then there are things that we want to measure, right? There are things we want to understand, including things like the otter populations, right? Those are things we can measure. We can also measure things like temperature. We can measure the biodiversity. We can, measure sea level rise. Like these are things that we can measure over time and observe about the world. And then finally, that there are these really big things that cause change in the world that some of you have started talking about, like pollutants and population growth, and fishing and hunting. And these are really big causes of change that cause our ecosystems and our climate to look different over time. So what we've done is take these ideas of these 3 big categories, right? And we've created a visual of like, okay, let's build out like a framework. Let's try to visualize what this looks like. So we have these causes, right, that can put pressure on the Earth system, right? Those really big things like the water cycle or the greenhouse effect. And then we can measure the changes that result from those processes being changed over time. So, again, this representing the Earth, that there are all these different parts of the Earth that we're trying to explain and connect and that are interrelated and that it's complex. But this is a way we can sort of break it down and simplify it. And of course, we've also represented the 4 spheres here. So atmosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere, which for younger learners, we could just call air, life, water, and land, right? We don't have to use the spheres. And I'll show you a version of it that uses, again, more accessible language in a second. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build up the complexity of this now for you really slowly. This is actually pretty fast because we don't have too much time, but I'm introducing this to you as adult learners to show you how you can put in all the different ideas that you've been talking about related to your phenomena into this framework and think about how they're related and where they fit. So again, I usually start with this Earth system. So these are like the big processes that shape the world through time. Okay, so things like I mentioned earlier, the water cycle and the greenhouse effect. But if we really want to build up the full complexity of how the world works, we have to think about the energy, right? And I know a lot of you talk about energy flow and sources of energy and photosynthesis. And so we start with sunlight, right? Sunlight is the source of all of that. And we have to think about how much sunlight is being absorbed or reflected by the Earth, right? How much we're receiving. And then also how much heat is coming off the surface of the Earth, and also heat that's re-radiated and stays in our atmosphere, right? Like from the greenhouse effect. But then we also have Earth's internal heat, which I won't go into much detail about, but of course that drives the rock cycle and other processes that happen internally and drive the plate tectonics. And that's from heat that's still there from when the Earth formed, from all of that energy or that mass coming together, and also from radioactive decay, right, of things inside the Earth. So we have Earth's internal heat too. But most of our energy, right, is coming from the sun, and is that heat that's re-radiated from that energy from the sun. So if you go on the website, you'll see that we have content pages about all these topics, and you can learn more if these are topics that you're going to be teaching your students about. But we can keep building up this framework. So we can add in our atmosphere, again, things I mentioned, the greenhouse effect, right? And the atmospheric circulation, how air moves, right? How we get weather, like that's really important to understand. Same with ocean circulation, that water moves in the ocean and that water cycles, right? These are really foundational concepts that we start teaching, especially things like the water cycle, right? Within, 3rd, 4th grade. And now if we want to look at the biosphere or life, things like photosynthesis and respiration, right? How we breathe, how we get energy. evolution and species interactions. So like ecology, right? How things interact. And then our geosphere, so the rock cycle and plate tectonics. And we've called out weathering here because it's actually really important for long-term climate change over millions of years. But don't worry too much about that. But this is why we've included weathering, the breakdown of rocks as these processes. And then we could connect all of the different parts of the earth, right? The air, the land, the water, the life, right? Because we have these elements that cycle throughout. So we often, especially in elementary school, we start talking about the carbon cycle, right? That's probably the one that we focus on. And once you get in the middle school and high school, you start talking about things like nitrogen and phosphorus, other nutrients that are cycling through. So these are the big things that shape our system through time, right? These are the big, and some of you have touched on these, right? Today you talked about the greenhouse effect and the water cycle. These things are, and even things like structure and function, that's related to evolution, right? And species interactions, like that's how, what do species eat? How do they interact in the environment with other species? So if we add up all these things, they are the things that they are the processes that shape our climate and our ecosystems. This is the core. These are the fundamental processes that are important. But we know, based on like what we know about our otters and our local sea levels and our salmon, that like the world's changing and it continues to change, especially today, very rapidly. So we have to look at causes of change that, again, will influence these processes over time, right? How the Earth system works. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but if we're looking over like millions of years and tens of thousands of years, we can look at things like the tilt of the Earth, or we've had meteorite impacts in the past, right? You know about the extinction of the dinosaurs, and how the continents are arranged over time shifts. And that can shape our climate and change things and how things work, or where we have mountain ranges. Think about, rain shadows and things like that, right? These things matter, but they change over millions of years, or they're very fast things like volcanism and meteorite impacts that are not happening right now, luckily, at any scale that causes a lot of the changes that we're experiencing. So we have to look to human causes of change in order to understand the changes that are happening around us. And a lot of you talked about these today. Again, fishing and hunting, pollutants and waste, burning of fossil fuels, connecting that to changes in our atmosphere and in our climate, urbanization, right? Habitat loss. These are all things that all of you talked about today that are related to your phenomena, right? So these are major causes. And so then finally, what we can think about is, what are the measurable changes that we want our students to think about? What are the things we're going to have them observe, right? Or look at data about in the world. And so again, we can think about different measurable changes in our air and our life, water and land. And if we want to fill in this side, so here are some of the really big ones, right? I'm sure all of you have heard at some point about like the ozone layer and greenhouse gases, right? And airborne particles. We've all dealt with smoke from the fires, right? That we're experiencing. These are things that we measurable and that are measurable and that we track over time. If we're talking about weather and extreme events, and you guys have had some storms lately, we can look at things like precipitation and clouds and temperature, right? Over long periods of time, this determines our climate. We can measure these things over long periods of times, but day to day, we are experiencing weather. So these are the things that determine our weather. And then in our oceans and in our water, sea level rise and oxygen levels and nutrients and snow and ice and ocean acidification, right? These are topics that you've probably heard about. And if we look at our biosphere, again, things that we've been talking about, species populations and fires and where species live, species ranges like our otters. Extinction and biodiversity and the quality of our soil. I know some of you are again doing garden projects and looking at monarchs and thinking about what do they need. Erosion, sedimentation, so all of these things are related to what we see and experience. And then if we look at the very center of this framework that we've developed, we have the things that are most closely related to the quality of human life. And this is where you can also really connect to your students. What are the things that affect, our air and our food and our water and where we can live, and that affect our well-being and the well-being of our planet, right? So these are sort of also the environmental justice and the social justice connections that you can make to your topics, right? So thinking about our salmon as a food source, thinking about our habitat restoration as a place where we can breathe fresh air and have clean spaces where we can live and play in the environment. So these are the things we can connect directly back to our quality of life, because we have to think about what does this mean for our life and our students' lives, and how do we connect the otters and the monarchs and the salmon all back to to their experiences, right? And what they're thinking about and what's going to affect them. So again, this was just a very quick introduction to the framework, just to get you thinking about that there are all these different parts that you've been talking about that are all interrelated and all important and all interconnected. And this was a framework developed by a team of scientists and educators to really call out what are the most important parts of the Earth that we really need to understand. And so again, we don't expect that you're going to use this necessarily with your students, but that you're going to be using this as a way of thinking and communicating about what are the big ideas and the connections that you want your students to make. And we have developed a version of this that is in more accessible language, as I mentioned, like air, life, water, and earth, or, instead of language like ocean circulation, saying just movement of water in the ocean, right? So to make it more accessible to all learners of at all levels. So with that in mind, I'm just going to show you a really quick example of what this could look like if we're thinking about our otters, right? So if we look at this framework, what are the parts of this framework we might call out that are relevant to our otters? So again, we've mentioned water cycle, right? And how species interact, thinking about like what otters eat and what they need in the environment. That determines species interactions, and also how humans interact with otters. If we think about our causes of change that are relevant to our otters, things like building cities, fishing and hunting, pollutants and waste, again, how burning fossil fuels will affect our global warming, and also how we need to be creating natural habitats, right, to support our otters. So these are the big ideas that are relevant. And, if we think about the measurable changes relevant to our otters, the amount of food that's available for them, and the biodiversity and the habitats where they live and where they're able to live, right? How their range has expanded, but also then, again, how temperature and sea level rise might affect their habitat and where they can live over time, if you want to start making some bigger connections to climate change. So I've been working with teachers who are sort of using this as a word wall sometimes with younger students, and we do have copies of this available to you as posters. So you can add these icons and create this word wall with your students about the big topics, the big ideas that you're investigating. But what I really want to do for the rest of the time that we have together, because I know we're short on time, is allow you to explore it a little bit, because this is really a lens through which you can see the world, right? This can help us focus our thinking about what are the big connections we're making. And it's also kind of the You Are Here map that, like, okay, this week I'm going to be talking about species interactions, but what are the things that students need to know that are related to species interactions? What are the connections I'm going to make? Or I'm teaching about photosynthesis, but how is photosynthesis related to the other things that I'm teaching in my class? So drawing those connections. So I created on the Jamboard some frames. If you click forward, I think it's frames 8 through 20, and you can go to those different frames and just start circling, just start saying, okay, I know I want to hit that topic. I know I'm going to hit that topic. And you can also start drawing arrows that show the relationships between those topics. I do want to point out that the text looks really small, but you can zoom in. There's a zoom button on the Jamboard. So that you can actually read the text more easily. So let me know if you have trouble doing that. But just go to a blank Jamboard. I'm going to flip over here to the Jamboard itself. I'm going to flip forward to the frame 8. So so you can write your name in here. Like, just claim one of these boards for yourself. So I see Megan already claimed that one. Awesome. And then you can go in and start here. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see how I'm zooming. So you can click on this and you can zoom in to make it more readable. And then you can click on these pen tools to circle things. You guys doing okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I wasn't muted, and Julie Ryan stole my board.
Ah, that's what happened. I was wondering what was going on.
How did I know that's what happened? That's the scary thing. As soon as I heard him, I was like, oh no, that's the one Ryan was gonna get.
Well, there should be plenty for each of you. So just take a few minutes and zoom in and just start circling. And again, don't expect you to get to everything today, but just the things that you recognize, you're like, yes, I'm definitely going to be teaching that. Or no, I don't think I'm going to be teaching that. I'll just leave that one alone. So just take a few minutes to explore the framework for yourself and think about the big ideas that you are going to be hitting. Feel free to ask any questions. All right, I see some circling happening. Very cool. And again, let me know if you're having trouble zooming. Awesome. All right, so how are we feeling about this? Are we finding things that we recognize, that we know we're teaching, and that focusing our thinking? See some nods from Sandra, Julie, and Megan. Okay. And what I've found over the years is that a sufficiently complex phenomenon, right, the way that students are going to explore the phenomenon that you've decided really usually requires that you look at all three rings, right? The measurable changes, some kind of system process in the yellow, and a cause. Like, what is the cause of the change that we're studying? So it's been interesting to see, again, over the years when I work with teachers developing their phenomena, that this can help them focus on exactly what the different parts of the explanation is that students are going to figure out over time, right? Like, what is their final model going to look like? What is their final explanation going to look like of the phenomenon? And that these different parts of the framework become part of that explanation. So this is great. So I see some great circling going on. And I also want to say that very often you'll start circling a lot of things at first, and then sometimes you narrow it down. Sometimes you're like, you know what, we're not really going to get to that in this unit, or I'm not going to expect my students to have a full explanation of that. And sometimes you start with a list of like 10 things, and then you narrow it down to like 5 or 6, and that's okay. But I think this helps to focus and also help you guys communicate to each other about what are the big ideas and the standards and the things that you're hitting that are related to your phenomenon. So, all right, so we just have a couple minutes left. Any questions, comments, thoughts about this. This is great. And this is useful also for me and Sagit for when we talk with you and further our discussion about your unit. So thank you for all of what you've done today and in showing what you're thinking and how you're planning. This is exciting. So
Thank you for doing that quick overview, because I do have this poster in my room and I've been very confused. And I had all the little things. I was like, I wonder when this will make sense. And so it's moving in that direction.
awesome. And that's our goal and we'll spend a little more time with this in February at our Saturday meeting together as well. So any other questions, comments, thoughts before we break for today? We just have a few more reminders for you. So again, we're meeting next time on Saturday, February 5th. We are going to be doing this remotely because of our current COVID Omicron situation, and we want to keep everyone safe and healthy. So we're going to meet at 9:30. We're going to have a full hour for lunch, most likely, and then we're going to go until 3:30. We'd love for you to take a look at chapters 5 and 6 if you have time and ambitious science teaching before them. That would be awesome. And continue to upload any teaching materials that you would like to share with me and with Sagit. And again, we've been reaching out to you to meet, and I know we've met with most of you, and we're really excited about that to continue those discussions. Start thinking about the standards, especially thinking about the DCIs. I know we talked a lot about big ideas today, but let's try to make sure that we're also hitting the standards that you need or want to hit. So if you have a few minutes, think about your standards, and we'll talk more about that next time and work on that together. And just a reminder that we do have an office hour next week. So I think Sagit and Megan and I will be there. All three of us will be there for at least part of the time. I'll be there the whole time from 3:30 to 4:30. So please pop in. Even if you show up at 4:15 or 4:20, I will still be there. So if you want to, have a short discussion, let me know, or you don't even have to let me know, just show up on the 19th, and we look forward to talking with you then. And if we still have a few spots available in the group, if you want to recruit a colleague from your school and bring them into this group, feel free to invite them in February to our February Saturday event if they are available. So I think that's it, unless Sagit or Michelle have anything you want to add to that. But it's so good to see all of you. We want to honor your time. We know it's 5:01, so just thank you for being here and all that you do, and for your students and your community. So thank you, and we look forward to continue this work together.
And I'll be sending
you,
out the
everyone.
Zoom momentarily for
Awesome.
next time.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Great job. Great job today.